Hi, I'm Madison. I'm a 34-year-old grief counselor who just buried my husband overseas. But the text message I sent to my family when I landed back home, it changed everything forever. Have you ever been abandoned by your family when you needed them most? 3 days ago, I was standing in a cemetery in Dublin, Ireland, watching them lower my husband David's casket into the ground. He'd been visiting his elderly grandmother when a drunk driver took him from me. 36 years old. We'd been married for 8 years, together for 12. The funeral was small. Just me, his Irish relatives I'd never met, and the overwhelming weight of a future I couldn't imagine. The flight back to Chicago felt endless. 13 hours of staring out the window, clutching David's wedding ring that I couldn't bring myself to take off yet. I hadn't slept in 4 days. I looked like hell, mascara permanently stained under my eyes, hair in a messy bun that hadn't been touched since the funeral. I was wearing the same black dress I'd worn to bury my husband because I literally couldn't function enough to pack properly. As we began our descent into O'Hare, I realized I had a problem. I'd taken an Uber to the airport 5 days ago, but in my grief-stricken state, I'd completely forgotten to arrange a ride home. My car was sitting in long-term parking, but I couldn't remember where I'd parked it. Hell, I could barely remember my own address at this point. So I did what felt natural. I reached for my phone and opened our family group chat, the Peterson Squad. It was me, my older brother Jake, my mom, and my dad. Just the 4 of us. The chat we'd used for years to coordinate holidays, share funny memes, ask for advice. I typed with shaking fingers. Flight lands at 5 p.m. Can someone pick me up? I hit send and leaned back in my seat, closing my eyes. Finally, I thought. Finally, I could stop being strong. Finally, I could let my family take care of me for once. My phone buzzed almost immediately. My heart lifted. Someone was responding quickly. That was a good sign, right? It was Jake, my big brother, the one who used to walk me to school when I was scared of the neighborhood dogs, the one I'd helped pay for his wedding 3 years ago when he was short on funds. We're busy. Try Uber. I stared at the message, certain I was misreading it. I blinked hard, thinking maybe exhaustion was making me see things, but no. There it was. We're busy. Try Uber. Before I could even process that gut punch, another message popped up, this one from Mom. Why didn't you plan better? Not even a question mark, just a flat statement, an accusation. Why didn't you plan better, Madison? Why didn't you think ahead while you were busy burying your husband in a foreign country? The woman sitting next to me must have heard my sharp intake of breath because she glanced over with concern. I quickly turned my phone screen away, embarrassed by what felt like a very public rejection. My hands were trembling as I typed back. What could I even say? How do you respond when your family abandons you at your lowest point? No worries. That's all I wrote. 2 words. I couldn't trust myself to write anything else because I was afraid of what might come out. The rage, the disbelief, the crushing disappointment, all of it was building in my chest like a pressure cooker. I put my phone in airplane mode and closed my eyes for the rest of the flight. When we landed, I felt like I was moving through water. Everything was slow, surreal. I collected my luggage, one small suitcase because I'd packed in a panic after getting the call about David. I stood outside the terminal with hundreds of other people being picked up by loved ones, watching happy reunions, watching families embrace. And I ordered an Uber. The driver was a kind Pakistani man named Hassan, who took one look at me in his rearview mirror and immediately turned down his music. Long flight? He asked gently. Something like that, I managed. You look like you could use some kindness today, he said. No charge for the ride. Sometimes we all need help. I started crying then. Not the dignified tears I'd managed at the funeral, but ugly, body-shaking sobs. This stranger, this complete stranger, had shown me more compassion in 30 seconds than my own family had managed in their text messages. Hassan pulled over at a gas station and bought me a bottle of water and a pack of tissues. He waited patiently while I pulled myself together, never once making me feel rushed or embarrassed. Family troubles? He asked as we pulled into my driveway. You could say that, I whispered. Family is supposed to be shelter, he said. When they become the storm instead, that's when you know something needs to change. I gave him 5 stars and a $50 tip. He'd earned it more than my actual family had earned anything from me. That night, I sat in my empty house, the house David and I had bought together, the house we'd planned to fill with children. And I started thinking, really thinking, about patterns, about history, about who I'd been to my family and who they'd been to me. See? Here's the thing about being the responsible one in your family. You become invisible. You become the person everyone expects to handle things, to figure it out, to not need help. But you also become the person everyone turns to when they need something. 3 years ago, Jake needed $8,000 for his wedding. His fiancée Sarah had her heart set on this venue, but they'd underestimated the costs. Jake called me, stressed out of his mind. "Madison, I don't know what to do. Sarah's going to be devastated if we have to downgrade everything." I transferred the money that same day. $8,000, no questions asked. Jake promised to pay me back as soon as things settled down after the honeymoon. That was 3 years ago. I never saw a penny of it, and after a while, I stopped asking. Jake and Sarah posted photos from their expensive honeymoon in Bali, bought a new car, renovated their kitchen. The $8,000 just disappeared into their life. 2 years ago, Mom needed help with her medical bills after Dad's insurance wouldn't cover her physical therapy following her knee surgery. $12,000. I paid it without hesitation because that's what family does, right? They help each other. Last year, Dad's business was struggling. He needed a loan to keep the doors open, but the bank wouldn't approve him. I co-signed for $15,000. The business recovered, Dad got back on his feet, but again, no mention of paying me back. Over the years, I'd estimate I'd given my family close to $40,000 in loans that were never repaid. But they weren't really loans, were they? They were gifts. Gifts to people who saw me as a solution to their problems, not as a person who might someday have problems of her own. And now here I was, at my absolute lowest point, and they were too busy to drive 20 minutes to pick me up from the airport. I opened my laptop and started doing something I probably should have done years ago. I started documenting everything, bank statements showing transfers to Jake, medical payment receipts for Mom, the loan documents I'd co-signed for Dad, screenshots of text conversations where they'd asked for help and I'd said yes immediately, no questions asked. As I compiled this evidence, a picture emerged that made my stomach turn. I wasn't a daughter or a sister to these people. I was a bank. A reliable, always open bank that never asked for collateral or charged interest. But banks have terms and conditions. Banks have limits. And banks can close accounts. I kept thinking about Hassan, the Uber driver who'd shown me more kindness in 30 minutes than my family had shown me in the worst week of my life. I thought about David's Irish relatives, practical strangers who had hugged me at the funeral and slipped me their phone numbers in case I ever needed anything. I thought about my co-workers who had covered my shifts without complaint and sent flowers to the funeral home. These people barely knew me, but they had treated me with more dignity and compassion than the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Around midnight, I made a decision that would change everything. I picked up my phone and opened our family group chat. Jake had sent a few messages throughout the evening, photos from some baseball game he'd attended with his buddies. Mom had shared a picture of her fresh manicure, her nails painted a bright spring pink. They hadn't been busy. Not really. They just hadn't cared enough to help me. I started typing a message, then deleted it, then typed another one and deleted that too. What do you say to people who have revealed their true colors so completely? Finally, I settled on something simple. Hope everyone had a good day. Jake responded immediately. Great game. Cubs won in the 9th inning. Mom, love my new nail color. Feel so refreshed. Dad even chimed in. Good to see everyone enjoying their Sunday. Not one of them asked how I was doing. Not one of them acknowledged that I'd just returned from burying my husband. Not one of them seemed to remember that they'd left me stranded at the airport. That's when I knew. That's when I really, truly understood what I was dealing with. These people didn't see me as family. They saw me as a resource. And when a resource stopped being useful or became inconvenient, they discarded it. But here's what they didn't know, what they had never bothered to find out. was that their little ATM machine had just become very, very wealthy. David's life insurance policy was substantial. His grandmother had also left him a significant inheritance that had just been processed through the Irish courts. Combined with our savings and some investments David had made that I'd barely paid attention to while he was alive, I was now worth just over $2 million. $2 million that my family knew nothing about because they'd never bothered to ask about my life beyond what I could do for them. As I sat there in my empty house, surrounded by sympathy cards and funeral flowers, I started to smile for the first time in a week. Not a happy smile. I was still devastated by David's death, but a different kind of smile. A smile that meant business. My phone was buzzing with notifications, but for the first time in years, they weren't from my family asking for money or favors. They were from friends, co-workers, and even David's Irish relatives checking on me, offering support, making sure I was okay. Real family, I realized, doesn't abandon you at airports. Real family doesn't charge you emotional interest on every act of kindness. Real family shows up when you're broken. And real family was about to find out what happened when you mistake genuine love for an unlimited credit line. I opened my laptop again and started making some calls. It was time for my family to learn a very expensive lesson about what they'd just thrown away. The news story that would make them drop their phones was still 24 hours away, but the wheels were already in motion. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. David always said I was most dangerous when I was organized, and grief had a way of sharpening focus like nothing else could. I made coffee in the kitchen we'd renovated together, sat at the table where we'd planned our future, and got to work. First, I called my lawyer, Patricia Hendricks. She'd handled David's estate planning and had become something of a friend over the years. "Madison, honey, how are you holding up?" she asked immediately. "I'm processing," I said, "but I need your help with something. Can you meet me today?" "Of course, whatever you need." We met at her downtown office that afternoon. I brought my laptop, a folder full of bank statements, and screenshots of every financial transaction I'd ever made for my family. Patricia listened without interruption as I laid out the pattern of behavior, the airport incident, and what I'd discovered about my family's priorities. "Jesus, Madison," she said when I finished. "I knew you were generous, but this is systematic exploitation." I showed her the loan documents for Dad's business. "I co-signed for this, which means I'm legally responsible if he defaults. But look at this." I pulled out his business bank statements, which I had access to as a co-signer. "He's been profitable for 8 months. He could have paid me back 6 months ago." Patricia examined the documents. "He's actually doing quite well. This is deliberate avoidance." "It gets worse," I said, pulling out Jake's social media posts. "Remember when he said they were too busy to pick me up? Look what they were busy doing." The photos told the whole story. Jake at Wrigley Field with his buddies, beer in hand, clearly having a great time. Mom at the nail salon, then getting lunch with her book club friends. Dad washing his car in the driveway, neighbor kids helping him for pocket change. "They weren't busy," Patricia said, scrolling through the timeline. "They just didn't want to be inconvenienced." "By their daughter returning from her husband's funeral," I added. "And here's what they don't know." I opened another folder. David's life insurance, the inheritance from his grandmother, our joint investments. "Patricia, I'm worth $2.3 million. Her eyes widened. "And they have no idea?" "None. I've been living modestly, working my grief counseling job, driving my Honda Civic. They think I'm just getting by, same as always. They think I'm still their personal bank with limited funds." Patricia leaned back in her chair. "What do you want to do about it?" "I want to show them exactly what they just threw away, but I want to do it in a way that also helps other people. David always said money should serve love, not the other way around." We spent the next 3 hours planning. Patricia had connections with local media through her charity work. She also knew the director of the largest grief counseling center in Chicago, a place that was struggling financially due to increased demand and decreased funding. "Here's what I'm thinking," I said. "David and I always talked about doing something meaningful with our money when we got older. Well, I'm not older, but I'm ready now." What if I made a substantial donation to the grief center? What if I made it public? What if I told the whole story? Patricia smiled. You want to expose them. I want to expose the truth. There's a difference. The next day, I called Susan Martinez, the director of the Northside Grief Support Center. I'd actually referred several clients there over the years, and we'd worked together on a few cases. Madison, I was so sorry to hear about David, she said immediately. How are you managing? One day at a time, I said. But Susan, I want to do something in David's memory, and I need your help. I explained my idea. A major donation to establish a new wing of the center specifically for sudden loss and trauma. A program that would provide immediate support for people facing unexpected grief, including transportation, meal delivery, and emergency counseling services. The kind of support, I told her to Kia, that people should be able to expect from family but don't always get. Susan was quiet for a long moment. Madison, that would be transformative. We've been trying to expand those services for years, but we just don't have the funding. What kind of donation are we talking about? $500,000, I said. To start. I heard her sharp intake of breath. Madison, are you sure? That's an enormous amount. I'm sure. David would have loved this. He always said that the worst moments in life show you who people really are, both the good and the bad. This donation will help people during their worst moments, and it will definitely show people who I really am. We scheduled a press conference for Thursday afternoon. Patricia helped me craft a statement that told the story without being vindictive, just factual. Susan arranged for local news coverage and social media promotion, but before I went public, I needed to gather one more piece of evidence. I drove to O'Hare and found Hassan, my Uber driver from Sunday night. He was in the pickup area, and his face lit up when he saw me. The lady with the heavy heart, he said warmly. You look better today. I feel better, I said. Hassan, I have a strange request. Would you be willing to speak to a reporter about Sunday night? About what you witnessed? His expression grew serious. Your family, they did not help you? They didn't, and I want people to understand what genuine kindness looks like. You showed me more compassion in 30 minutes than my family showed me in the worst week of my life. Hassan nodded slowly. If it helps other people understand the importance of kindness, yes, I will speak. I also reached out to Dr. Emily Chin, a colleague who had covered my clients while I was away. She'd been checking on me daily since I returned, bringing me groceries and making sure I was eating. Emily, I said when she stopped by Wednesday evening with Thai food, I need a favor. Tomorrow I'm doing something that might seem dramatic, but it's important to me. Will you be there as my witness? Of course, she said immediately. What's going on? I told her everything. The airport, the family history, the donation, the press conference. Emily listened with growing outrage. Madison, this is beyond cruel, she said. You've been their safety net for years, and they couldn't even pick you up from the airport after your husband's funeral? That's exactly why I'm doing this. Not for revenge, but for clarity. I want everyone to understand what real family looks like versus what exploitation looks like. Thursday morning, I got dressed carefully. Not in the black dress I'd worn for the funeral, but in a navy blue suit David had always loved. I put on the earrings he'd given me for our last anniversary. I looked professional, composed, and strong. The press conference was held at the Grief Center at 2 p.m. Patricia had arranged for coverage from 3 local news stations, the Chicago Tribune, and several online outlets. The center's main conference room was packed. I stood at the podium, looking out at the reporters, cameras, and Susan's staff. Emily sat in the front row, smiling encouragingly. Hassan had come too, wearing his best shirt and looking nervous but determined. My name is Madison Peterson, I began. 5 days ago, I buried my husband David in Dublin, Ireland, after he was killed by a drunk driver. 3 days ago, I returned to Chicago, exhausted and grieving, and sent what I thought was a simple request to my family group chat. I pulled out my phone and read the message exactly. Flight lands at 5 p.m. Can someone pick me up? The response from my brother was, We're busy. Try Uber. My mother added, Why didn't you plan better? I heard murmurs from the audience, expressions of shock and sympathy. I want to be clear. This isn't about one bad day or one misunderstanding. This is about a pattern of behavior that I've been enabling for years, a pattern where I was expected to provide financial support without question, but when I needed the most basic gesture of care, I was treated as an inconvenience. I showed the reporters the bank statements, the loan documents, the social media posts from that Sunday. Everything was projected on the screen behind me. While I was ordering an Uber after burying my husband, my brother was posting photos from a Cubs game. My mother was sharing pictures of her manicure. They weren't busy. They just didn't care enough to help. A reporter raised her hand. Madison, why are you sharing this publicly? Isn't this a private family matter? I paused, thinking about how to answer that honestly. Because I think there are a lot of people out there who recognize this pattern. People who have been the designated helper in their families, who give and give and give, only to be abandoned when they need help in return. I want those people to know they're not alone, and they don't have to accept that treatment. Also, I continued, because I want to do something positive with this experience. David and I were blessed financially, more than my family ever knew. Today, I'm announcing a $500,000 donation to the Northside Grief Support Center to establish the David Peterson Sudden Loss Support Program. The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters started talking over each other. Susan stood up and hugged me, tears streaming down her face. This program, I said once the room quieted down, will provide immediate practical support for people facing unexpected loss, transportation, meals, emergency counseling, legal assistance, all the things that people should be able to expect from family but don't always receive. Another reporter called out, Madison, have you spoken to your family since the airport incident? They don't know about this press conference, I said. They don't know about the inheritance David left me. They don't know that the person they treated as a burden is actually in a position to help thousands of people. They're about to find out along with everyone else. What do you hope they learn from this? Asked another reporter. I thought for a moment. I hope they learn that family isn't about what you can get from people. It's about what you give freely without expecting anything in return. It's about showing up, especially when it's inconvenient. And I hope they learn that when you treat someone's love as an unlimited resource, you might discover that it actually has limits. Hassan raised his hand and was given a microphone. I want to say something, he said in his accented English. Sunday night, I picked up this lady from airport. She was broken, crying, alone. I could see she needed kindness, so I gave her free ride, bought her tissues and water. Cost me maybe $20, but her own family, they could not drive 20 minutes to help her. This is not about money. This is about human heart. The room was silent as Hassan continued. In my country, we say family is like house foundation. If foundation is broken, whole house falls down. But sometimes you must build new foundation with better materials. This lady, she is building new foundation with kindness and service. This is true family. After the press conference, Susan and I spent an hour with the media explaining how the donation would work, what services it would provide, and how people could access help. The story was already going live on social media. I drove home around 5 p.m., emotionally drained but feeling lighter than I had in years. I made dinner, something I hadn't done since before David died, and sat down to eat while checking my phone. The story was everywhere. Local news had picked it up immediately, and it was spreading on social media. For Real Family was trending. People were sharing their own stories of family betrayal and chosen family love. My personal phone had been buzzing all afternoon, but I'd kept it on silent during the press conference. Now I looked at the notifications. 17 missed calls from Jake, 23 text messages from Mom, 12 voicemails from Dad, multiple messages in our family group chat that I hadn't opened yet. I decided to look at the group chat first. Jake. Madison, what the hell? Jake. Why didn't you tell us about David's money? Jake. We look like complete assholes on the news. Mom. This is so embarrassing. Mom. Why would you air our private business? Mom. We were going to pick you up. We just got confused about the time. Dad. Sweetheart, we need to talk. Dad. This is getting out of hand. Jake. Mom's crying. Jake. You've ruined everything. Mom, I can't show my face at book club. Mom, how could you do this to your family? I read through all of it, and then I started laughing. Not bitter laughter, but genuine amusement. Even now, even after being publicly exposed for their selfishness, they were making it about themselves, their embarrassment, their reputation, their feelings. Not one message asking how I was doing, not one apology for leaving me stranded, not one acknowledgement that they'd done anything wrong. I opened a new group chat and titled it Chosen Family. I added Emily, Patricia, Susan, and even Hassan. Then I typed my first message. Thank you all for showing me what real family looks like. David would be so proud of what we're building together. The responses came immediately. Emily, we love you, Madison. You're not alone. Patricia, strongest woman I know. David would absolutely be proud. Susan, you've changed so many lives today. This is just the beginning. Hassan, family is made with heart, not blood. You have big heart. I looked back at the original Peterson Squad group chat, at all those angry, selfish messages, and I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Peace. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't responsible for managing other people's emotions or fixing their problems. I wasn't the family ATM or the designated helper or the person who always said yes. I was just Madison, widow, grief counselor, philanthropist, surrounded by people who loved me not for what I could do for them, but for who I was. My phone rang. It was Jake, calling for the 18th time. I let it go to voicemail. Instead, I called David's cousin Siobhan in Dublin, who had been checking on me since the funeral. Madison, she said warmly. How are you, love? I'm okay, I said, and realized I meant it. I'm actually okay. And I have something to tell you about what David's love made possible today. We talked for an hour about the donation, the press conference, the family situation. Siobhan listened without judgment and offered only support and love. David always said you were too good for your family, she said finally. He worried they took advantage of your generous heart. He was right, I said, but he also taught me that real love multiplies when you give it away. Today, I gave away $500,000 and I've never felt richer. That's the Irish in you now, Siobhan laughed. We know the difference between family and relatives. That night, I went through David's things and found a letter he'd written to me that was supposed to be opened after his death. In it, he wrote, Madison, my brave girl, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're trying to figure out how to live without me. Here's what I want you to know. You are not responsible for other people's happiness. You are not required to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. The money we've saved together, use it to build something beautiful. Use it to help people who deserve help. And if anyone in your life makes you feel guilty for choosing yourself for once, remember that they never really loved you anyway. They loved what you could do for them. There's a difference, and you deserve better. Build a family that deserves you. I love you forever. David. I folded the letter carefully and put it on my refrigerator, right next to a photo of the Grief Center's groundbreaking ceremony for the new wing. Outside, my phone was still buzzing with calls from my biological family, but inside my house, David's and my house, I was finally home. Tomorrow, the David Peterson Sudden Loss Support Program would begin accepting applications. Tomorrow, people facing the worst days of their lives would have somewhere to turn when their families failed them. And tomorrow, I would wake up as someone completely new, a woman who had learned the difference between being alone and being lonely, between being used and being loved, between family by blood and family by choice. The news story that made my family drop their phones wasn't about revenge. It was about resurrection.